We all want it, right? We spend our whole lives chasing it, working for it, but if I asked you to define it right now, could you? Let's get into it, because the idea of wealth is one of those things we think we know, but it's packed with some really fascinating ideas that shape our world in ways we barely even notice.
So let's just ask the question straight up. What is wealth, really? It sounds so simple, but it's not exactly the same thing as money, and it's for sure not the same as having a big salary. Getting the difference between these ideas, well, that's the key to understanding how entire economies and even our societies actually work.
Okay, to really get our heads around this, let's use a simple but powerful metaphor. Think about money as just a glass of water. You fill it up, you drink it, and boom, it's gone. It's for right now. Wealth, though, wealth is the whole reservoir, all that water held back by a giant dam. It's not about what you're drinking this second, it's about the massive potential you have stored up.
And that really nails what money is. It's a liquid resource. It's meant for transactions, for paying the rent, buying groceries. It's designed to flow. And once you spend it, its job, for you at least, is over. It's temporary, just a current that's always moving.
But wealth, that's a whole different animal. It's static. It's a store of value. It's the savings, the house, the investments you built up over time. It's that huge body of water sitting in the reservoir. It's not flowing away, it's being held. It represents potential energy, just waiting to be unleashed. And that's the key, right? You can have tons of money flowing through your hands every month, but build up very little actual wealth.
So, if money is the glass of water and wealth is the reservoir, what happens when you decide to actually use that stored up power? Well, that brings us to our third big word, capital. So think of your wealth as all the ingredients you have stored in your pantry. Capital is when you take those ingredients and you actually put them into the economy's cooking pot to make something new. It's wealth that's been activated. It's wealth put to work. Okay, so we've got our terms down. Now let's see how this one idea, wealth, basically built the world as we know it. I'm not kidding. The ability to have wealth didn't just change our bank accounts, it completely re-engineered human society. And it all kicked off with one simple breakthrough. And this is it. This is the origin story. For almost all of human history, we were just trying to get through the day. But then agriculture happened, and suddenly we could produce a surplus. We had more grain than we needed for today or even for this week. That stored extra, what Karl Marx later called plus value, that was the very first form of wealth. And you know what happened the second wealth existed? We started fighting over who gets to control it. This struggle has pretty much defined all of human history. Way back in ancient Sumer, the priests who controlled the grain surplus in the temples, they became the world's first bankers. Fast forward a few thousand years, the Magna Carta, that wasn't just about abstract rights. It was about forcing the king to share power that came from owning land, a key form of wealth. And the French Revolution? Well, that was a massive, violent explosion against the whole idea that wealth and power should only belong to a tiny group of aristocrats. This connection between wealth and our place in society is captured perfectly by this quote. Where your wealth comes from, whether it's land, a business, or your own labor, that has historically decided your social class. But how you show it, how you spend it, that's what gives you status in the eyes of everyone else. And that's just as true today as it was centuries ago. And don't for a second think this is just ancient history. Even in modern democracies, you can see how wealth and power stick together. Get this, it's a pretty startling number. Over the entire 100-year history of the Turkish Republic, all the thousands of members of parliament who've been elected have come from a pool of just 850 families. It seems wealth and influence, they really like to stay in the family. So if wealth is this incredibly powerful force, how did nations actually use it to create prosperity for everyone? Let's go back to that cooking pot idea. A country's success, really, it all comes down to how good it is at getting all of its ingredients into that pot. See, every economy, doesn't matter if it's your own budget or an entire nation, is working with 4 basic ingredients. You've got land, and that means all natural resources. You've got labor, which is the effort people put in. You've got capital, that's the wealth we put to work. And last, you have entrepreneurship, the ideas, the risk takers who mix the other 3 together in new and exciting ways. And this, right here, this is the big secret. The main difference between a rich country and a poor one isn't usually a lack of ingredients. It's the ability to get them all into the cooking pot. In underdeveloped economies, resources just sit there, people can't get jobs, capital gets stashed under the mattress. But in developed economies, the whole system is built to get every last drop of potential into that pot, to let it all circulate freely and create new value. But Even in countries that are trying to get things cooking, a huge problem can pop up: idle wealth. So let's look at this data from Turkey, just as an example. The top 1% of the population holds about 40% of the country's total wealth. That is a massive concentration. But the real issue isn't just that it's concentrated.
It's what that wealth is actually doing, or more accurately, what it's not doing. A staggering 80% of that wealth held by the super rich is tied up in real estate. It's just sitting there. It's not capital funding a new tech startup. It's not being invested in innovation. It's wealth that's been pulled out of the cooking pot and locked away in the pantry again.
And all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most important takeaway. At the end of the day, wealth really has two possible fates. It can either be hoarded and kept still, or it can be circulated and put to work. And the choice a society makes between those two paths, it changes everything.
There's an old saying that I think just captures this perfectly. It says, there are 4 things in this world that should never ever be allowed to stand still: land, water, people, and money. The moment any of these vital resources stop moving, they start to decay, to lose their power.
So here's the choice, laid out plain and simple. On one side, you have idle wealth. It's driven by fear, by hoarding. It leads to stagnation and decay. It's like a dam holding back the water until it gets murky and stagnant. But on the other side, you have productive wealth. That's all about investment, circulation, and growth. It's the river that flows, spinning turbines, watering fields, and bringing life and energy to everything it touches.
And so that's the question we're left with. It's a question for each of us and for our society as a whole. How do we see wealth? Is it a private fortress that we have to build and defend from the world? Or is it a vital river that only really finds its purpose when we let it flow, creating growth and opportunity for everybody? The way we answer that really does shape everything.